the World Cup that was bought. What if the biggest event in sports was never about football at all? What if it was handed to a desert kingdom with no team, no fans, just one stadium, and $200 billion to spend? A place where summer heat hit 50 degrees Celsius and thousands of migrant workers collapsed building a dream not their own. But this isn't just about bribes. It's about a system built for corruption and sold to the highest bidder. Because FIFA didn't lose control, they sold it. How did Qatar pull this off? And what did FIFA sacrifice to make it happen? Chapter 1. The Day Football Changed. December 2nd, 2010, Zurich, Switzerland. FIFA gathered for a historic double announcement, the hosts of the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. The air was thick with anticipation. Prince William stood for England. Bill Clinton backed the US. Prime ministers and royal envoys filled the room. This was football diplomacy at its peak. Then came the shock. 2018 goes to Russia, and 2022 to Qatar. Qatar, a desert nation barely the size of Connecticut, one World Cup-ready stadium, summer temperatures that hit 50 degrees Celsius, and a national team ranked 113th in the world. Not a footballing powerhouse, not a tourism capital, not a logical choice. Even insiders from Qatar's bid committee were stunned. Reports later revealed they expected to lose. In that room, decades of football tradition were overturned in seconds. The sport's biggest event had just been awarded to a country that wasn't remotely prepared. In hindsight, this wasn't just a bold choice, it was a turning point. A seismic shift that would trigger FBI raids, expose FIFA's rotten core, and leave a death toll in its wake. But in that moment, all anyone could do was clap. How did a tiny Gulf nation with no football legacy beat giants like the US, Japan, and Australia? What did Qatar know or spend that changed the outcome? Chapter 2. Bribes, Briefcases, and Backdoor Deals. The answer wasn't football, it was money. Not tactics, not passion, not vision, just cash. Wired, laundered, and hidden behind consultancy contracts and shell companies. Investigations revealed a network of backdoor payments to key FIFA executives. Rafael Salguero confessed to accepting $1 million for his vote. Jack Warner allegedly received $5 million. A Qatari-owned company funneled $2 million directly to Warner's family. FIFA's own ethics committee later confirmed multiple voting members had direct financial links to Qatari businesses. One FIFA official's daughter, with no relevant experience, was paid $880,000 for consulting. No office, no reports, just a bank account and silence. Qatar wasn't just bidding, they were executing a multi-pronged influence strategy. Sponsorship deals, phantom consulting roles, construction contracts in exchange for votes. The tools of soft power deployed like a military operation. This wasn't about winning fairly, it was about winning inevitably. The vote was framed as a global decision. In reality, it was a closed-door auction, and Qatar came in with a blank check. But here's the question, was Qatar the exception or just the best at playing a corrupt game? Was this a one-time scandal or the symptom of a much deeper rot inside FIFA? Chapter 3. The Rigged Blueprint. The truth is, FIFA didn't break. It worked exactly as designed. Back in 1964, a quiet but critical change was made. FIFA stripped its Congress of World Cup voting power and handed it to just 24 men, the Executive Committee. That small group? They would decide the future of football's biggest tournament. No longer one vote per country, just a few men behind closed doors holding all the power. To win a World Cup bid, you didn't need global consensus, you needed 13 votes. That's it. Not stadiums, not legacy, just influence and access. The truth is, FIFA didn't break. It worked exactly as designed. And that system? It didn't get patched, it got protected, because it gave power to the few and silence to everyone else. That same structure, meant to streamline decisions, turned into a fortress of corruption. Instead of fair competition, it fostered manipulation. Bid committees stopped pitching ideas. They started pitching offers. Of the 22 men who voted in 2010, 13 were later indicted, banned, or exposed for corruption. That's more than half the room. The very people trusted to choose the World Cup host, on trial or disgraced. For fans, it was a celebration. For football's power brokers, it was business as usual. A tournament that should have been won with passion was handed out through briefcases. And the moment it happened, no one protested, no one questioned it. The applause drowned out the truth. This wasn't failure, it was structure. Corruption wasn't an accident, it was a feature. FIFA didn't just allow it, they architected it. And they left it untouched for decades. So if FIFA built a system that guaranteed corruption, who had the power and the reason to keep it alive? Chapter 4. Sepp Blatter's Silent Blessing. In the immediate aftermath of Qatar's shocking World Cup win, FIFA President Sepp Blatter stood firm. He claimed the vote was fair, that it would bring football to the Middle East. A bold defense from the sport's most powerful man. But behind closed doors, the cracks were already showing. A few years later, Blatter's tone changed. In a rare admission, he called the Qatar decision a mistake, but not because of infrastructure or heat or footballing logic. He blamed politics. According to Blatter, the turning point came at a secret lunch, hosted in the Élysée Palace. Around the table, French President Nicolas Sarkozy, the Emir of Qatar, Michel Platini, UEFA's most influential voice. Just days later, Platini, who had been leaning toward the US, switched his vote to Qatar. And shortly after that vote, France signed a $7 billion fighter jet deal with Qatar. Coincidence? Or a trade? Votes for contracts. This wasn't football diplomacy. It was real diplomacy, bought and traded behind closed doors, where FIFA votes became geopolitical currency. The world's most prestigious tournament was no longer awarded on merit. It was auctioned off by politicians, power brokers, and profit seekers. But that was just the political cost, because the real price for Qatar's World Cup would be paid by thousands who had no seat at that table. Chapter 5. The Stadiums Built on Suffering. After winning the bid, Qatar faced an impossible task. They had just one stadium and only 12 years to transform a desert into a world-class host. So they announced a monumental infrastructure plan. 8 stadiums, dozens of hotels, new highways, a fresh airport. It would take tens of thousands of workers fast. And that's where the scandal turned darker. Qatar turned to imported labor, cheap, replaceable, invisible. More than 30,000 workers from Nepal, Bangladesh, and India were brought in to do the job. They worked around the clock in one of the world's hottest climates, often without proper breaks, rest, or medical care. According to The Guardian, over 6,500 migrant workers died in Qatar between the time the bid was awarded and the opening match. 6,500 lives, not for football, but for concrete, steel, image. Workers lived in cramped labor camps, often sleeping 10 to a room. Many had their passports confiscated. If they complained, they risked deportation or worse. This wasn't just exploitation. It was a system of modern slavery, wrapped in a football banner. Global outrage eventually forced Qatar to respond. They introduced labor reforms, promised better conditions. But watchdog groups said enforcement was weak. The deaths kept happening. The camps stayed full, and the games moved forward, on time, on schedule. But this wasn't just about image, because while Qatar built stadiums for the world, they were also building a wall of silence around the truth. Next, what happens when even the fans are part of the propaganda? Chapter 6. Fake Fans and Information War. In the weeks before kickoff, Doha erupted into celebration. Streets were flooded with what looked like massive fan parades. Jerseys, chants, flags, pure World Cup energy. But there was a catch. Many of these so-called fans were South Asian migrant workers, quietly paid to cheer. Same men who built the stadiums now asked to fill them. Qatar didn't just build a spectacle, they staged one. Influencers were flown in on luxury jets, handed pre-written scripts, and told exactly what to post and what not to. Positive hashtags were bought, critical voices were buried. A sport that once thrived on authenticity was now a carefully curated performance, and while some were paid to speak, others were punished for it. Journalists who investigated human rights violations were blocked, detained, even deported. A Danish TV crew was harassed live on air. A German documentary team had their footage seized. The message was clear: truth was not welcome. The world thought it was watching a global celebration, but behind the scenes it was censorship, surveillance, and spin. Football wasn't uniting the world, it was being weaponized to control the narrative. Still, Qatar's strategy worked. Billions watched, most never questioned the show. The chants were loud, the stadiums were full, and the critics lost in the noise. That's how soft power wins, not with force, but with framing. But here's the real question. After all the image control, censorship, and staged pageantry, did Qatar get what it wanted? Chapter 7: The tournament that kind of worked. Despite years of scandal, global outrage, and bombshell investigations, the 2022 World Cup kicked off right on schedule. The football? Brilliant. The visuals? Breathtaking. And the world? Distracted. Critics shouted, but the noise of the goals drowned them out. FIFA got what it wanted: spectacle over substance. And Qatar? They got their global moment. For fans, it was magic. Messi lifted the trophy. Tears, joy, redemption. But for the workers who never saw the pitch, for the families left behind, there was no celebration, only silence. And while the world partied, the real story kept unfolding. Investigations didn't stop when the final whistle blew. In fact, they picked up speed. More whistleblowers come forward. Legal probes expanded. The tournament had ended, but the scandal was far from over. Leaked documents revealed Qatar's reach extended well beyond FIFA. There were influence campaigns targeting European think tanks, sports media outlets, even UN-affiliated NGOs. All part of a long game, using football as a Trojan horse for soft power dominance. One leak suggested millions were funneled to create fan delegations, staged groups who acted as cheerleaders online and in the stands, while critics were muted or shadow banned by coordinated social media ops. If Qatar pulled off all this, if they bent the World Cup to their will and faced no consequences, what does that say about the next hosts? And more importantly, is this the new blueprint for global sport? Chapter 8: The journalist who never left Qatar. Grant Wahl was no ordinary sports journalist. A veteran of Sports Illustrated, a voice for human rights, and one of the loudest critics of Qatar's treatment of migrant workers and the LGBTQ+ community. He flew to Doha for the World Cup, but never flew home. On December 9, 2022, during the quarterfinal between Argentina and the Netherlands, Grant Wahl collapsed in the press box. He died shortly after. Official cause? A ruptured aortic aneurysm. But many didn't buy it. Just days earlier, Grant had been detained for wearing a rainbow shirt, supporting LGBTQ+ rights while entering a stadium. He was outspoken, defiant, and in a podcast days before his death, he said this: "They don't care, they just don't care." He also claimed he was feeling pressure, both from Qatari authorities and FIFA handlers. The shock of his passing triggered a storm. Tributes poured in. So did questions. How could a healthy man collapse in a place where dissent was already being silenced? Was it natural or something darker? His wife, a physician, accepted the medical findings, but global suspicion never faded. The incident spotlighted just how unsafe truth-telling had become, not just for players or workers, but for anyone who dared to speak freely. If even a world-famous journalist could vanish without answers, what else went unseen beneath Qatar's perfect illusion? Chapter 9: The Blueprint for Global Sports Corruption. Qatar didn't just host a World Cup, they staged a masterclass in influence. What millions celebrated as a triumph was, in reality, a $220 billion illusion. This wasn't just the most controversial World Cup ever, it was a blueprint, a manual on how unchecked money, soft power, and systemic silence can hijack the world's most beloved sport. From rigged votes to media manipulation, from labor exploitation to global distraction, Qatar didn't break the system. They showed the world exactly how it works. FIFA still hasn't implemented meaningful reforms. Many of the same officials, or their protégés, remain in power. Sponsors returned, broadcasters renewed deals, and the next bidding war already underway, behind closed doors. One internal FIFA memo, leaked in 2023, warned that future World Cup selection processes risk being influenced by non-sporting interests. Yet that memo? It was never published, just buried. So after all the headlines, all the outrage, the machine kept moving. FIFA cleaned the surface, but left the gears untouched. And that's why this story isn't over. Because Qatar wasn't just a scandal, it was a signal to every rising regime with money and ambition. If Qatar could bend the World Cup to its will, what happens when billionaires start buying entire empires of clubs to rewrite football from the inside out? Up next, the genius scam behind multi-club ownership. A global network of clubs, one corporate master, and a loophole so smart it's changing football forever.